We're going to talk about Rebecca Morris's book, which we were mentioning last week, and that is about Ted and Ann. It's the youngest victim, they think, of Ted Bundy's, and he lived just around the corner from Ann. And it's a mystery because nobody knows where she was buried. I just wanted to show you the map. There's Taylor Mountain, where Ted Bundy was known to use it as a dumping ground for his victims once he killed them. But this was when he was in his adult years. It was a familiar territory to him. He was around 14 years old. He was stealing things left and right at that point. But I think that if he was going to do something, it was probably going to be pretty close to where he killed this poor little girl, eight years old, right out from under her parents in the middle of the night. And they say that she wasn't supposed to be the intended victim. It was her sister. And so he was looking for her, but Julie ended up taking Ann. I also put that picture there, 18, and that is Route 18, right outside of Taylor Mountain. And maybe that was the route. And you know what we say about 18. So 18 is the evil degree, or can just be a mean degree or a sickness degree. It's not good. And it comes up a lot in crime charts. And so here are headlines, and Kiely Rodni and Eliza Fletcher, who you probably saw in the news. She was on a jog. She was pretty wealthy. So that comes out in the chart. And I just made a quick outline of what we're going to talk about. The headlines, Bundy's natal chart again, just a couple extra observations. A wedding chart of Ann Burr's parents that would show the terrible things that would happen to their kids on that day that they got married. You can see that in their wedding chart. We'll look at a Bundy crime chart, and actually that'll be Ann's chart, and then we'll map Ann.
This is the 12:33 time that Kiely's phone went off, and as you can see, the AC is in Cancer, water. Black Moon Lilith is right there, conjunct the AC. The big part that surrounds 12 Cancer is the part of boldness, violence, and murder. Now, Venus is at 23 Cancer, and this is the home of Pollux. It could indicate that there was a couple or a pair. Pollux and Castor are considered the bad boys, and they are opposite. You can see Pluto here. They're opposite Pluto. And then we have the sun at 13 Leo. And so you can see that the sun is exactly opposite Kiely, who's in the 8th house of death. So we've got sun opposite Kiely, but the sun is conjunct a fixed star called Acubans, and this is a hiding place for criminals. It can indicate malevolence and poison, liars and criminals. And when it's conjunct the sun, it can show an unsettled mentality, but it also means that someone was forced to do something, like pushed from behind. So maybe the gentleman was forced to do something because of someone else was pulling his strings that night. Mars at the Arabic part of trickery and deceit. So a man tricked her. Someone tricked her that night. And it's the part of deceit and violence. And it is conjunct Uranus. And there's a fixed star in between them called Rana, which is indicative of drowning. So there's an indication of drowning, but it's next to Mars. So what does that tell us? It tells us that they're trying to make it seem like she drowned. You see the sextile there to Neptune at 25 degrees Pisces. So let's talk about Neptune. Neptune is conjunct a fixed star called Markab, and that shows a violent death. So, and it's culminating, it's right at the NC. So that again is a violent death. And then again, it says, if you see this star with Neptune, it means violent death. So all over right there. And where's the MC? 22 degrees. So there's a third person involved. So what's his name? His name is Nate. So we look down at the fourth house at 18 degrees Libra, which is the arrest degree. Nate is opposite Chiron, and Chiron has another indicator around it that means poisoning. And I know you're like, well, she didn't get poisoned, but there is a chance that she was slipped something in her drink. Now, if that something makes you pass out, that's a poisoning. I mean, you may not die from it, or she, maybe possibly could have, but she was murdered in the meantime. Mercury's in the third house. Mercury can indicate stranglings, and we've seen a lot of that recently. So I'm kind of wondering if perhaps she was strangled, but you can see that there is Bacchus is on the cusp. Bacchus means to be inebriated or drunk, and it's right on the cusp of the 7th and 8th houses. So alcohol had a lot to do with this, and it may have been one of those kind of things like, if you love me, you'll get rid of her. I'm just saying, I'm not saying who, I'm just saying, or if I can't have her, no one can.
Yeah, when I saw Pluto there and right the opposition with Jagger, the name asteroid, to me it sounded like someone was extremely jealous. And then there was Pluto in the 7th house. So it gives some kind of feeling of jealousy. So,
well, and Pluto Venus can also be obsession.
Look at how that Neptune there at the top really showed us where she was and where she could be found. And with Jupiter retrograde, it was confusing at first because we were like, well, her boyfriend wasn't even there. And Jupiter usually indicates a significant other. And in a retrograde, it's the person's weak. They're not living up to expectations. They might have a lot of flaws. They could be jealous. So it didn't make sense, especially with trining Sun there. With that Mars there next to Uranus, that's obviously a guy trining Pluto. He's jealous and he's strife. So now I am going to go to the next chart.
But right off the bat there, look at that Grand Cross. Like, she is trapped. She has nowhere to go. We've got Venus square Uranus, Uranus square Saturn, and Saturn square the moon, moon square Venus. Moon is opposite Uranus. I mean, it's a mess. There's so much going on there. There's so much emotion and tension. Elizabeth at 15 Virgo, and she's opposite Nessus, which is abuse, in the 8th house. They are both square. I didn't add all of the aspects because it was so busy. There's just too much going on in this chart. I threw in Persephone, which means to be abducted, and sure enough, she's right on the AC. And then we looked at Phaeton, which it means car. It is on the 11th house cusp at 9 Gemini, which is a degree of homicide, and Photographica, which she was caught right on tape being kidnapped. And that is in the 7th house, and it's loosely opposite Persephone. So, wow. If we look at Saturn, Saturn is angular. The sun is in the 2nd house. That's the chart ruler. And the chart ruler is at 9 Virgo. 9 Virgo is also a degree of homicide, a body in the ditch degree, right? And then the moon is also angular. So if you just look, and the moon is the lost, right, at the 22nd degree. So I want to say, and they've already found the car and some guy. I want to say that she will be found. I think she's going to be found tomorrow. I really think she's going to be found tomorrow. I think the perpetrator is going to give it up pretty quickly. What do you think, Val?
With Eliza there, now she's the sun, but she could also be the moon if you're looking for the co-ruler. And so when I see something happen at the top of the chart, which is Uranus, that's a shock in public, right? And with the emphasizer point North Node right next to Uranus, that's a huge shock. And of course, it has to do with her running. Uranus at the top of the chart here, that can mean a divorce. I hate this thing. Right here. And then we have Saturn in Aquarius, which can mean divorce. So sometimes that lays a little groundwork as to what might have been going on. Maybe she was talking about divorce. Maybe there was some kind of a split that was happening. And what's interesting is that Eliza you have her in the 7th, but you also have her in the 2nd. That's the personal name asteroid that Grace pulled. And it's amazing. Eliza is a wealthy woman. We have Venus in the 1st house, which gives you a little flavor of who Eliza is. Venus may be beautiful. Maybe she's wealthy. Maybe she has blonde hair because of Leo. Leo can often show that a victim has blonde hair or reddish hair. And she's at the 26th degree, which is at the Taurus degree, which is also wealth. Okay. So money seems to be a central factor in this. We've got the ruler of Aquarius, Saturn, which this represents the perp right next to Eliza. And it's in retrograde. And what does that usually mean? It means that the perpetrator is weak. And it's going to be really hard for this person, whoever he is, to be successful. You can see 3 things I put at the bottom here: multiple personalities, a scar that would appear when he would change. His eyes would turn black. Okay. He was drawn to college towns. Okay. What is college? Sagittarius. And so every part in his life, he was going towards college towns. Okay. The other thing that he would do, he was a planner. Whenever he was thinking of his next crime, he would painstakingly plan the murder. And so that's what we see in crime charts. If Sagittarius comes into play, maybe there's a stellium, maybe the planet that represents the perpetrator is in Sagittarius, it usually means that it was planned. Okay. And what do Sagittarius people do? They're always thinking about the next trip. They're always planning. What are they going to do next? They have a big mind and they're just constantly projecting. So you see, look at how many points and planets are in Sagittarius there. He's got multiple personalities. Ted Bundy, his ruling planet is the sun, okay? And that's your personality, all right? It just happens to be the Lord of the Ascendant. So inside and out, he's a Leo. But the sun is trining Pluto. Pluto means a lot, many different personalities, and it's so close to his ascendant. meaning his personality. So he has a lot. That trine from Pluto to the sun. And then we've got a sextile to Neptune. So many different personalities are disguised because Neptune is to disguise. There's so much here that you could pick apart. And well, what does Scorpio represent? Revenge.
Mysteries. Yes, revenge.
Mysteries.
Jealousy.
And you mentioned mystery. Okay. Well, what was he known for doing with his friends when he was 14? He would look for detective magazines and read them. And a lot of those in the late 50s, 60s, there were the big crime magazines were out, the True Detective types of magazines. Now that penchant turned to porn, and how he would, I guess, shift to that genre, and he would roam the alleys looking for it in the dumpsters, and he found it. So he would tell investigators later that he felt the best at night. That's when he came alive. That might be under the horizon here. You can see that with all of these planets, and also the 12th house too. The 12th house is nighttime. It's when everyone's sleeping, and that's when he felt his most alive. Okay.
And he claims that he got most of his pornography, or his proclivity to pornography, because he found things in alleys. But it was reported that his grandfather had a huge stash of pornography. He was very into pornography. So
yes, we've got again, but it's another slide, multiple personalities. He was a planner. He had a scar that would appear. Okay, let's look at that for a second. We have what's on your face is the ascendant, but there's also Chiron there. Chiron would be a mark, okay? And the mark would appear when he wanted to kill, or when he had those killing fantasies. So it would just appear. Evidence, and what they found, they took a mold of the footprint, and the footprint they said was a teenage shoe in the shoe that showed that it was pretty unique. So they tracked it down to a teenage shoe. And I think one of our viewers saw that last week, where there was a mark, which was Chiron, and Chiron can mean a mark, a tattoo, or a scar, and it was a shoe. I believe it trined Neptune, which can mean shoes. Neptune rules Pisces, which is shoes. His eyes would turn black. Now, your eyes tend to be Aquarius. Aquarius's eyes and ankles, but then also Aries too. What would you pick if you were to look at somebody's eyes, and if they were to change, which might be Pluto?
Yeah, I would say Pluto.
Okay. It's like transform. They would transform. I don't know.
I would imagine, I'm just going to take a wild guess, but I would bet that there is an asteroid or something right there that either means to change. And I thought sun, Chimaera. The Chimaera is a shapeshifter.
Remember when I was just saying on one of the charts that we were looking at, I want to say it was Eliza's, that when you have the ascendant in Leo, you're usually blonde or reddish blonde hair. But if you have Saturn close to the ascendant in either the 12th or the first house, it can mean you have darker hair, that it's it colors the blonde, colors it black. So if I've got black here, okay, well, what are his eyes? His eyes were blue, okay? And that is Neptune. That's a sextile. So you have blue, you've got blue eyes, and then Pluto is right there. It changes to black. So blue eyes change to black. Maybe at night, 12th house. While he's killing, squaring Jupiter in Scorpio. And also while he is aggressive too, or maybe he's using a weapon with the trine to Mars. Okay, let's see.
Interesting.
Ascendant is what people look like. And this is Ted Bundy's natal chart. He's got blue eyes with this aspect to Neptune. Neptune means blue, but those eyes change to black. Pluto, it's like a metamorphosis. And then also look, you've got Uranus, which also means to change. So you've got Uranus trine Neptune. And that's changing blue from changing blue to black. So you can see it in that respect too. It's kind of more north node, but
it's also opposite his sun and is shape-shifting.
Yes. Okay, he was a master at disguise, which would be Neptune. We already talked about the porn. Revenge was a major motivation. By the time he's in college, he even went back to the girl that dumped him, pretended like he was interested, and then dumped her. So she was very lucky that she just got dumped. But it was soon after then that he started killing other people. But that was his first real act of revenge, added to, the fact that he just liked to kill. Do you remember the girlfriends were saying how I didn't understand, like he really enjoyed scaring me. There were multiple times when the girls they would be on a date with him and he just jumped out and they would scream and he would laugh and he just got a lot of energy from that. Uranus is to jump.
He also used to like to take little girls into the woods and abuse them when he was 12 to 14 years old.
Yeah, so he would get energy from jumping. Like you can see Uranus there in the 10th. I think that might be to jump and to scare and to hide. Blood would be Mars. South node is like a leak, like leaking blood. And I wonder if that's almost part of his personality. His signature is right here, what he did in secret. He moved his victims' bodies a lot. And I think that is really important here because when we look at these crime charts, that's one of the big questions that come up. People even look on some of these YouTube channels and they want to see where they're looking, and then they'll go and they'll change the location. But to change, I want to say it's Uranus, could be Pluto. What do you think?
I'm going to say Uranus because it's in Gemini, which is a movable, air sign. And he liked to scatter things. I would go with Uranus on this one.
And then also aspecting Venus in Scorpio with Jupiter. Jupiter is a lot. Venus is women. Mercury is groups of women. And so he's killing Scorpio, groups of women, and then he's changing them out in the open and doing weird things to them. As he told investigators, it's just unbelievable. What he would do, he would put makeup on them. And now that would be Neptune makeup. So that's a big one for him, was that Neptune. What I did was I did a horary. Where is Ann buried? And I saw a little bit of a similarity with one of the other charts we did, and that was Maria Rydolph. And her chart had, I believe she was Venus, and then it was a straight drop down, and there was Neptune right here. And she, I can't remember. Then she also had Saturn in Sagittarius. So it was, a body was found in open field, but there was another clue there that she was found in mushrooms, in a mushroom field. So when I saw that, like, okay, when I saw that chart, I was like, okay, this chart is telling me where she started and where she ended up. Okay. Usually fourth is end of the matter. But now we have the third here with this horary, and a horary is just asking a question. Where is Ann buried? I'm asking about a dead person. So the ascendant in Capricorn makes sense. Okay. So you could look at Saturn, which is in the second house. But I just saw that elevated planet, Mercury. And Mercury can mean a small child. And remember, what is Ann's last name? It's Burr. And Burr is a Capricorn name. So that shows her name right there, and that she was killed at 8 degrees, the Scorpio degree. So I think this is a pretty good horary. So
Wasn't
you would
she
have
8 years old?
Oh my God. That's amazing. So the reason I'm doing this now is because it's one of our methods when we're trying to find someone. We look really well in the crime chart. We look at the birth chart. We pull a horary, and we see the common themes here. So if I were to look at this chart like I did with Maria Rydolph's, which is featured in our next video, which I've not made public yet, but I will. Grace, you've seen it. You've approved it. So I just need to put it out. But Mercury, isn't that amazing how it's in opposition down to Jupiter in Aries? So what that tells me is, and people wouldn't say it was a stellium, I don't think, in the third house, but I call it a stellium, because if there's a lot of points in a house, I think it's a stellium. So sometimes in astrology, you've got to make up your own rules a little bit, if they keep working. Okay. That's what I'm saying. Grace, you can remain silent. But Jupiter in Aries. Okay. So Aries means sports, like a sports complex. It could mean where construction is, where there's a lot of nails, where there's a lot of hammers, where there's a lot of metal. Okay. And the third house, that would show, wouldn't that show that she's close to the
in
house?
the neighborhood?
She's in the neighborhood. She's local. Okay. She's in the ninth. That would show she is
Way far away.
But if we are looking at the third, and that third is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune, okay, so that's giving that more dimension to the third. So it might be a wet place. And what happened that night? It was raining. It was raining. There was mud. That's how they got the shoe print in the first place, because the shoe was in the mud as he was trying to get inside that house. And can I also add, what represents the window? Neptune. Neptune's a window. It's glass.
Yeah.
Okay. So he got in through that window. And I think that also plays out in the crime chart. But anyway, I think that just going by this horary, that it could give us a clue that something's red, there's construction, that there's water around because of Neptune. And it also shows like it's a local mystery too. It's like the neighborhood mystery, because Neptune is mystery. There was a sewer project right near Ann's house. Now, Ted lived at his uncle's house. His uncle lived here first, and then I think he lived like right down the street next. So he lived in 2 different houses here. Okay. And he lived by a major road. So that's kind of interesting, where like Mercury is 2, and 9th house is like a highway. But so Ted, you can see, and this is a half mile right here. You can see he lives less than half a mile away from her. And they're the 2 main areas that they were looking at where Ann could possibly have gone. Ann Burr was the sewer project, which was the southwest of her. And then there were fraternities under construction. And they thought that he might have put her right where the construction was, which now there's paved road over it. There's construction everywhere, so that doesn't help us. We think she's local. We think she's in the neighborhood. I also like to look at Saturn too, because Saturn is a body. I'm thinking it's the sewer project. All right, so you've got her, you've got Sun, okay? You have Anne. Anne is Sun. She, that's amazing. Uranus is right on the ascendant. That's amazing. Like exactly on her. Like you can't. And then it's partile North Node. That is the biggest shock, like you could even ever imagine.
I can't imagine. That would scare the Jesus out of me.
And mom couldn't get to her. Moon's up at the top. Yeah. She didn't see it, which is that square, that red line there. Sun is sextiling Neptune in the 3rd house in Scorpio, and Scorpio rules sewers. This is my theory. Mm-hmm. And in the 3rd house, and there's Neptune there with water, again, local mystery, and it's in Scorpio, so local sewer. That's where I think she is. I think she's in that sewer, or well, it was a sewer project, okay? Mm-hmm. So that's different than a sewer. They were working on it. Mm-hmm. I think she's around there. I do.
I'm going to concur, because if we look at this, the Sun is conjunct Pluto. Pluto is nasty, right? Virgo, food,
yes,
disposal, that kind of thing, right? So, and then so you say, well, okay, Saturn. Where's Saturn? Saturn is Capricorn. Capricorn, again, government type.
Yes. Work. Government changes.
Yes.
With that Pluto.
Right. So, and then the IC is the condition of the graves. So wet and gross. I think it is right next to some kind of businesses, like right around there. Maybe, I don't know about the fraternity houses. I would think that would be more like 9th house. But the sewer project by the street, that's sort of a border.
So with that being said, I am going to we're going to look at the map again. Okay. Mm-hmm. We have Anne down here. We've got Ted, who he went back and forth, and within a half a mile around her, there's fraternities under construction. There's a project here. There's a project there. They're hemmed in between 2 projects, okay, with lots of nails and Mars-related things like, hammers and metal equipment. There's no water over here. There is nothing really Scorpio-related there. So I'm going to say it's the sewer project, and you concur. Now I'm going to map it. This is where Anne is, and the sewer project was here. Neptune at 9 degrees. Okay, so what I did was I went, so we've got Scorpio, and why Neptune? Because Sun moves to Neptune. Okay, it's like that's where she went. So Neptune at 9 degrees. We should probably look up what that is. I don't know what 9 degrees is as far as a fixed star. But you could say it's 219. A lot of times I'll just use the William Lilly degrees. I think it's a good idea to add the degrees, but that doesn't always work. So, but you get 219. And so what you do is you go to Scribble Maps, and it's really important to put in the precise address if possible. Okay, putting in Tacoma is really not going to help. You really have to put in that specific street. So that's what we did. We put in 3009 North 14th Street. We plugged in Neptune, and sure enough, that was right where the sewer project was. I think she's there. This is the crime chart again. Okay, what I wanted to show you is there's Chiron there. There's that mark, okay? And it was right by the window where he got in. And you see this with Madeline McCann too. He got in through the window, I think, and I believe I believe Neptune is right in the third, but he left behind, north or south node left behind a mark by the window, and it was his shoe. And Pisces is shoe. So is Neptune. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. So if you want to look for shoe prints, look in Pisces. See if you got something with south node. And even though south node right now it shows Aquarius, and Aquarius is like evidence, it's DNA, but there was not going to be any DNA collected at that point, not in 1961. So they had a real hard time finding anything that was left behind. But it's close enough to that mark, to that Chiron, to maybe show that something was left behind, that like a teenage footprint.
Ann Burr's parents were married in 1951, but it was no fairy tale. They were married in her parents' living room, and Ann was in love with someone else who was married. According to the book Ted and Ann, as told by Ann's sister Julie, their mother Beverly was stuck in a loveless marriage. Her strict Catholic upbringing would seal her fate with Don, eliminating divorce as an option. In a wedding chart, you look to the ascendant and the descendant as well as their respective ruling planets to get a picture of the marriage. Jupiter retrograde can show a disappointment with the husband where he doesn't live up to the bride's standards, and that was definitely the case here. A Saturn-Moon conjunction in the 9th would represent the couple's despair in the news, the 9th house of the press, and their deep pain as shown by the square to Chiron showing deep wounds. Here is Bev and the children with Ann on the far right, 1 year before her disappearance. Bev was a talented writer and had big career aspirations at the time of her marriage, as denoted by the bride's ruling planet Mercury. It was the 1950s, and brides were supposed to stay home and take care of the children, according to Dawn, not aspire to working at newspapers like young socialite Jackie Kennedy, who started her first job at a newspaper in 1951, the same year Bev and Dawn got married. Bev's plans would never take off due to her husband's jealousy of her talents and the tragedy of her daughter Ann's death. Bev was known to secretly communicate with the media to keep the story of Ann in the press after she disappeared, represented by Mercury in the 8th. She would be talking about a death. But the real story of the Burrs' wedding chart is the downfall of the union, showing Ted's appearance and the possible cause of their family tragedy. You can see his personal name planet at the bottom of the chart in a T-square with Mars at 22 degrees and opposing Neptune. A murder mystery. Notice how the name Ted shows up in the 3rd house of neighbors. When Don was searching with police for Ann on the morning of her disappearance, Don swore when he was riding in the back of the police car that he saw a person with a description of Ted by the end of a pit, stomping his feet in the mud as if he had just buried something. Another personal name asteroid for Ted is in the 12th house of the bride. In Gemini, meaning young, a young killer was Beverly's hidden enemy.